Across the Flow FM network, a Flow News 24 update.
And at the Flow News desk, we have a look at an important industrial relations development. The Workplace Relations Minister, Tony Burke, has indicated that the federal government may be open to exempting small businesses from its plan to allow casual workers to switch to permanent employment after 6 months in the job. Now, the independent Senator Jackie Lambie has expressed concern about the potential impacts on the casual labour reforms on small business, noting that many are already struggling in the wake of the pandemic, natural disasters, cost of living crisis and other issues. Harvey Norman's chairman is Gerry Harvey. He contends that the proposed reforms do not make sense as businesses may offset their increased costs by downsizing their workforce, and he adds that most of the retailers' casual staff prefer to have the increased flexibility compared with permanent employment. Well, this is interesting that it may be that small business, tourism, particularly in this particular light, the Hotels Association and others would be very concerned because a lot of work is seasonal. A lot of work is based on whether it's going to be a good night, whether or not it may be the footy clubs coming back to have their drinks and meals at the particular establishment. And this means that extra staff are employed on the occasion. Now, if those staff are called in and out over a 6-month period, those people then could be entitled to a permanent employment where they just simply wouldn't have the hours to be offered. And that's the same across a whole range of employment. It's the same in the media where a journalist could be on the road for a particular story, for a particular time at a particular location, and they may well be doing more than their normal casual hours for that period of time, but not regularly in that particular light. So these reforms that Labor are bringing into place are making it a lot harder for business, and in this case they're saying they may look to put small business as an exemption. They haven't said they will, they're saying they may, and when a government doesn't come out with a concrete position, they generally are hedging their bets and usually going the other way. And this goes into another story where the Australian Services Union is now pushing for the right to have the disconnect from work laws enshrined in the Fair Work Act. Now, this becomes very concerning because when you consider what the Australian Services Union's Assistant National Secretary, Emmeline Gasky, is saying, she says that a growing number of countries are introducing a legislated right for employees to refuse to answer work-related emails or phone calls outside of their standard working hours. An ASU survey of clerical and administrative workers across several industries has found, amongst other things, that 1 in 3 respondents are expected to perform work outside their scheduled work hours. And in addition, half of all workers feel pressured to take calls or monitor emails outside of work hours. So the point being made here is that with any particular employment, there is a onus on both parties to do what would be fair to each other. And in that sense, if somebody is answering regular calls outside of work hours in a sales particular role, then they're on an award that generally takes that into account, or the employer offers some particular extra benefit. But on this particular occasion, we've got the Australian Services Union saying they want to enshrine this in the Fair Work Act. And then, therefore, they're saying they want to make it lawful or unlawful in that sense for a person to be able to go back to their employer and say, well, I actually answered this call and you're actually breaching your employment with me because in the Fair Work Act I don't have to answer calls. What happens when there's a fire emergency and there is a need to communicate? What happens when there are children sick or home from school? You don't have to take that particular call on that particular issue. The employer also has rights here too. And that becomes the question. If you have the rights one way, where somebody doesn't have to answer a call, well then does the employer have to take a call from the worker after hours and so forth? Because, well, the employer, after all, is just an employee really in their own company in the main these days. So it is, for mine, a push by Labor and the unions. It seems to be growing, a growing push that small business just simply is going to have another raft of new type payments that they'd have to make under and outside of hours calls and a range of I need to disconnect from work.
A Flow News 24 update.